Very warm welcome to our colleagues from all over the world. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar in the Stay Connected 20 series to support our global learning community. We hope that you will find what we discuss here today useful and it will start lots of positive conversations amongst our global family of schools. Today we'll be presenting a webinar that we previously conducted in collaboration with British Schools Middle East on the IEYC, IPC, and IMYC and the English National Curriculum. The presentation itself is a recording, however, all our presenters are here for a live Q&A session at the end. I have a very quick few reminders for everyone before we begin, just to ensure that the webinar runs as smoothly as possible and we can all access it as efficiently as possible. Please ensure that your microphone is always on mute so we don't get any background noise. There will be an opportunity for a live Q&A session, as mentioned, with all the presenters from this recorded webinar. So please do type any questions you may have during the webinar into the chat box directly to the host, as you can see on the screen. Could you also kindly specify which presenter or curriculum your question is addressed to, or if it's just a general question? We will do our best to get through all the questions at the end. If you do not wish to see the chat box or notifications, you can disable these before we begin the webinar. If you're having any difficulty with sound, kindly check your sound settings, or alternatively, you can leave the meeting and rejoin, and this should resolve the issue. As we have people joining us from all over the world, there may be intermittent bandwidth issues, so please do bear with us if you experience any delays or lags in connection. This webinar is also being recorded and will be made available soon after the webinar is complete. Today we'll be hearing from three colleagues at Fieldwork Education. Therese Andrews is the Head of International Curriculum, Primary and Middle Years at Fieldwork Education. Prior to this, Therese worked across 3 continents in schools offering both the IPC and the IMYC, having taught our international curriculum and having been part of the early growth of Fieldwork Education and transition into North Education with her time in Boston, Massachusetts. Therese has excellent experience of the Fieldwork Education international curriculum in action. We will also be hearing from Jacqueline Harmer, who is the IPC Curriculum Manager at Fieldwork Education and has more than 20 years of experience in the international education sector. Originally a primary teacher in the UK, Jacqueline has worked in schools across 7 countries with roles including academic head, deputy principal, and curriculum coordinator. She also spent time as a materials development advisor in Bangladesh for VSO and a PYP curriculum manager with PIB. My name is Sneha Raithatha, and I joined Fieldwork Education in September 2019 as an early years education consultant and started my new role as International Outreach and Development Manager, Middle East and Africa in Dubai in January 2020. I was originally an early years teacher with a background in teaching a variety of curricula for over 10 years, including Montessori, EYFS, and IB-PYP, both in the UK and Southeast Asia. Prior to joining Fieldwork Education, I authored and led the content development of the Montessori curriculum for the learning journal provider Tapestry and helped facilitate the inclusion of the IEYC curriculum outcomes on Tapestry. We will now begin our webinar on the IEYC, IPC, and IMYC and the English National Curriculum.
Mustafa is an early years consultant and international outreach and development manager for the Middle East and is based in Dubai. I'll hand over to Fieldwork.
Good morning, everyone. This is Therese. Thank you so much for being with us today in what's a very uncertain time, as Cheryl mentioned. So we're very grateful to have you with us this morning. I'll just talk you through the agenda that we have for this morning. We're going to look first at fieldwork education and just a little bit about what we do at the international curriculum. And then we'll look at the three curriculums. So we'll have the IEYC, the early years, the IPC, primary, and then we'll move on to the IMYC for 11 to 14-year-olds. So fieldwork education has been improving learning in schools for more than 30 years. And we do this through consultancy, through our curriculum, and also we support this with our professional learning range for schools and through our rigorous accreditation process. Support schools is shaped around the developmental needs of each learning age group, and we aim to strengthen children's moral, social and cultural development. And from the very, very beginning of fieldwork education, our focus has been on helping schools to improve learning, and we've since supported thousands of schools in over 90 countries globally. Moving on to our curriculum, the first curriculum product that we developed and began to sell to schools was the IPC, or the International Primary Curriculum, and this was introduced in the year 2000, so we are celebrating its 20th birthday this year, and it's been one of the fastest growing international programs in the world. It was originally written for 14 schools that were owned by the oil company Shell. Then it's expanded into other international and state schools in the 20-year period. And it's now present in more than 1,000 schools in over 90 countries. The IMYC, the International Middle Years Curriculum, was subsequently introduced in 2011 in response to demand from the IPC schools asking for a curriculum to meet the needs of learners beyond primary. So we developed the IMYC using neuroscientific research on the teenage brain and how it learns, and it's been designed with these needs in mind. And the IMYC is now used in more than 100 schools in over 50 countries. And then finally, the IEYC, the International Early Years Curriculum, was introduced in 2016 after new research and feedback from member schools demonstrated that early years settings needed their own curriculum to meet the needs of children at this crucial stage of development. The IEYC is now used in over 500 schools and early years settings in more than 60 countries. So these three products are what we're committed to at Fieldwork Education, and we help schools to improve learning through these curriculum products. The learning goals for the international curriculum were developed using benchmarking from well-regarded national curriculum from all over the world. And this includes international learning goals, which are quite unique to our curriculum and promote the concept of international mindedness. And as you can see, if you were to log onto our website, you'd be able to access this map. And this map gives you an idea of where our schools are located. Each curriculum, so you can see the colour of each curriculum, and altogether we're working with more than 15,000 teachers in over 1,000 schools across 90 different countries, so we do have quite a large global reach. In terms of the content of this webinar, thinking about English curriculum aligning with the international curriculum, this illustrates how that aligns. So you can see the top line in red is the English national curriculum, and then the second line going from blue to green to dark green is the Fieldwork Education International Curriculum. So we've got the IEYC from age 2 to 6, IPC going from age 5 to 11, and IMYC going from age 11 to 14. There are a number of aspects that tie our different curriculum products together. So even though they're three different curriculum, and they're aligned in their ethos, in their global outlook, and the idea of being international and having international mindedness, in the shared understanding of learning, which we break down into knowledge, skills and understanding in the IPC and IMYC, and in the pedagogy as well. And one of the important things about our curriculum is its metacognitive aspect. And a common misconception about metacognition is that it's only developed effectively in older students and young adults. But the research shows that children as young as 3 have been able to engage in a range of metacognitive and self-regulatory behaviours, such as setting themselves goals and checking their understanding. And the metacognition that they display represents higher order thinking, and therefore is more important than cognition or subject knowledge, and we should look to develop both at the same time. So that's just one of the many aspects that we think is really, really important in the development of our curriculum, and what we ensure aligns right through the curriculum journey at the international curriculum. So now I'll pass over to my colleague Sneha, who will be able to talk to you about IEYC specifically.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I can see that was there a question? Oh, it says good morning, okay. So I'll just jump right into the introduction for the IEYC. As my colleague Therese mentioned, the International Early Years curriculum was introduced in 2016 after new research and feedback from member schools that demonstrated that early year settings needed their own curriculum to meet the needs of the children at such a crucial stage of development. So the IEYC is now used in over 500 schools and early year settings in more than 60 countries. And we believe, for the IEYC, we believe that the children are not passive receptors, but are born naturally curious and ready to explore the world. And they construct their knowledge and they develop new skills through experiences and interactions with others. The IEYC has also been designed so that teachers scaffolded and differentiated learning activities to help spark children's imagination and enabling interests and inquiry to flourish through contextualized learning. And this type of learning inquiry provides greater opportunities for children to learn independently, opening up multiple possibilities. Oh, you can't hear me? I've just seen the chat. Some can hear clearly, some can't hear me. Is it any better? You can hear, you can hear. Is it just Sharon? You can't hear. Are you happy for me to continue if the majority are okay with the clarity of sound? Perfect. Okay, I'll continue. Sharon, this is being recorded as well, so you'll be able to access it if you can't hear at the moment. But if it's all right, then I will continue. Okay. Right. So we were at yes. So we were at the point where I was saying that this type of inquiry provides greater opportunities for children to learn independently and interdependently, and this is actually one of the learning strands that is embedded in all the units for the IEYC, and it opens up multiple possibilities for personal, social and emotional development. So the IEYC, as you can see on this slide, we have 18 units of learning so far. We started off with just 5 units in 2016, and as the popularity grew, the units were continue to be added with more activities, and of course has 4 learning strands that underpin all the learning and development. Each learning strand was developed after extensive evaluation of the learning experiences that are regarded internationally as developmentally appropriate for this age range. And each of the 4 learning strands describes what children will experience and learn about through contextualized activities, and these activities are woven into the IEYC units of learning. Each IEYC unit of learning has also been carefully designed around a central theme. So as you can see, you've got This Is Me, Ocean Wonders, The Brilliant Bug Ball, etc. And around the central theme, they holistically are linking all 4 learning strands to relevant and engaging activities. And these can be adapted, of course, and extended to meet individual needs of children. And the 4 learning strands can be used to guide teachers' planning so that there is rigor to what and how the children are learning. As you can see, the diagram where it says a child-centered IEYC learning strands and learning process, the entry point for those of you who may not be so familiar with the IEYC unit is planned and enabled for children to explore new experiences in exciting ways. So each unit has its own unique entry point, and each IEYC unit of learning has a suggested entry point idea, which can be adapted according to children's developmental needs. And the IEYC encourages teachers to be creative and use their own ideas to enhance this entry point. So it's in no way prescriptive and can be adapted and extended according to your local context, which country you're based in. And of course, after the entry point comes capturing curiosity. And this is achieved when teachers are aware of what children are curious to learn, and then the unit is adapted to enhance these opportunities. And of course, children come with their own knowledge base that they've learnt at home. And each class will be unique. So the activities and opportunities are planned according to each class, each child's interests, and so forth. After capturing curiosity, we go on to enabling the environment. And this is the process of planning and developing relevant indoor and outdoor learning spaces to create the positive climate for inquiry and learning to take place. The big picture provides the children with an overview of each unit of learning and prepares children for a new learning experience, whilst at the same time helps establish connections with previous learning. And it gives teachers an overview of why the theme is important and links to child development. Then we move on to the explore and express activities that are within the unit. And these aim to provide children with opportunities to engage in activities and to that have been holistically designed around the 4 learning strands. And then we go to the exit point at the end of the IEYC. And this exit point provides opportunities for children to reflect and share and celebrate what they have learned. Exit points are also used to share and demonstrate learning with parents and the wider community. So we could have a celebration as such of the unit that they've been learning about for 4 to 6 weeks, or even longer in some cases, where everybody can join in and celebrate the children's learning. And of course, bring their own experiences and share their own communities, celebrations and ideas with the children. So moving on to the next slide. So here we've got the mind map. So similar links, this mind map essentially maps out the structure of the unit, and similar links can be made to EYFS development matters. So as you can see on the mind map, it includes learning blocks for each unit and the activities linked to each learning block and the color-coded learning strands that each learning block will cover. So links can similarly be made to the EYFS development matters areas. So of course the areas for EYFS are physical development, communication and language, personal, social and emotional development, literacy, mathematics, understanding the world, and expressive arts and design. The IEYC learning strands are independence and interdependence, communicating, inquiring, and healthy living and physical well-being. Moving on to the next slide. So as you can see on this slide, we have a document available on My Fieldwork, and this cross-references the EYFS with the IEYC learning strands and outcomes. And it's available if you log into My Fieldwork, those who are implementing the IEYC, and you click on resources, and then documents, and you can select national curricula and the IEYC, or simply click on the link that's available on this slide, and it should lead you to this cross-referencing document for the IEYC and the EYFS. Now, I'm sure all of you are aware that there's going to be a change to the early learning goals for the EYFS from September 2021. And some schools, of course, are choosing to roll this change out this year in September 2020. So taken from the document that was released by the UK government. So from schools across the country, this was last year, were set to trial the revised early learning goals and the key measures teachers use to decide how prepared children are to begin year 1 at the end of reception year. and the changes were aimed at reducing teachers' workload to free up more time to support children's early skills and produce engaging lessons. So the four guiding principles for the EYFS will remain the same. The prime and specific areas remain the same, as do the characteristics of effective learning. However, the early learning goals, still 17 in number, however, they have changed, and they will be revised in this cross-referencing document, as the changes are also made to the development matters statements. So the EYFS early learning goals in this document, from I think page 18 onwards, have been cross-referenced with the IEYC learning outcomes, and this entire table will be reviewed in line with the new early learning goals. In addition to the ELGs being revised, as mentioned, according to the EYFS reforms, the development matters statements relating to the 7 areas of learning will also be streamlined and revised, and will need to be cross-referenced within this document as well, Phase A and Phase B outcomes. As I said, some schools will be opting to using this new framework on a voluntary basis from this September, but the statutory framework will be out in all schools who are using the EYFS from September 2021. So the timeline, essentially, the pilot scheme in 24 schools was concluded in July 2019. The consultation from this pilot scheme was released in October 2019, and to last until the 31st of January 2020. So after January, we've had a massive global issue. So I believe the reformed framework will still be released soon, but we haven't got a date yet for the official documentation to come out. But this document that's available on my fieldwork will be updated as soon as we have access to the new document that will be released by the government. Moving on to the next slide. So as you can see here, I've just created a table just to sort of break down the prime and specific areas for the EYFS and compare them to the current early learning goals and the new learning goals. So of course, this is available to everybody on the government on the UK government website for development matters for foundation years. But just to give you an overview, that the prime and specific areas remain the same. The current early learning goals and aspects are available in the second column, and then the new early learning goals and aspects that will be rolled out from September in the third, just to give you a comparison of maybe how things are changing or how they may be broken down going forward. In the next table, I have broken down the IEYC learning strands and knowledge, skills and understanding outcomes, and cross-reference them to the new EYFS early learning goals. So this is just a draft table at the moment. Of course, this will be refined further once the document is officially released. But as you can see, the IEYC learning strands, for example, communicating and inquiring, can be easily cross-referenced to speaking and listening. Of course, development matters statements are a lot more thorough, and the outcomes for communicating and inquiring within the IEYC are also much more thorough. But yes, as you can see, if you go, I was just looking at the comments, actually somebody else can't hear, but I will continue. Okay, so you can see as communicating and inquiring can be cross-referenced to speaking and listening, healthy living and physical well-being, independence and interdependence can be linked to gross motor and fine motor skills, and so forth, if you look through the table. So this is just a rough breakdown of what it might look like once the new document is released. But of course, once we have a more thorough view of the development matters statements, the document that's available on my fieldwork will be updated accordingly. So in this slide here is just an example of how schools are choosing to add observations in early years and track assessments. So we recently have launched a collaboration with Tapestry, which is an online learning journal provider. And the IEYC curriculum is now available on Tapestry for people to use and make their observations for early years, as well as link them to the IEYC learning strands, as well as the EYFS, so you can simultaneously track and monitor assessments for both curricula at the same time, because there was nothing like this previously. Schools were using their own methods of assessment and tracking for IEYC and early years. that through this medium, I mean, this is an option for schools. It's not something that's mandatory, but it is our first collaboration with a learning journal provider, and the IEYC at the moment is only available on Tapestry. So you can add observations and track assessments via this provider and link them to both the IEYC and EYFS learning outcomes. And we will continue to collaborate with Tapestry. The more popular it gets, we've been asked by several people to include analysis screens for the assessments, which is something we'll definitely look into the future, to look at the analysis of progress for children across the Phase A and Phase B learning outcomes.
Thank you, Sneha.
That's it for me. Oh, sorry, I think actually we moved on. There was one more slide there, but I think it's gone. But yes, that was it.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name's Jacqueline. I am the curriculum manager for the IPC with Fieldwork Education. So I'm going to give you an overview of the IPC programme and then look at some of the connections to the English National Curriculum for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. So in general, this is the bigger picture of IPC. It's structured around 3 areas, which are subject, personal, and international learning. For each of these areas, we have specific goals, and these change from milepost 1 to milepost 2 to milepost 3, which are 3 age sections that we have. The subject and international goals include knowledge, so things that children should know about, skills, things they should be able to do, and understanding that they should develop throughout that milepost. The personal goals refer to the characteristics that children need to develop that we consider will help them to thrive in the future and in their current learning situations. The international learning goes beyond just the specific goals that we provide, and it also aims to develop international mindedness. This would be whether they were in a local school, in a state school, where they'll be looking at international perspectives and understanding what's happening around the world, and then in international school, where it might be just about understanding why people are different and similar in their own classrooms. So I'm going to say a little bit more about each section. So these are our personal goals. There are 8 personal goals, and these should be developed as part of the units of learning, but equally they should be part of the school culture. Most of our schools create a statement around what they would like as an outcome for their learners at the end of their time in primary school. So they may add to these if they're a particular type of school, but we expect to see these 8 core ideas being developed. So our subject and international learning goals, the knowledge, skills and understanding, are addressed through our units. We have 131 thematic units, and there you can see our 3 sets of mileposts. There is a little bit of flexibility with the mileposts because we know that some schools start their learning at different ages. So they want to finish milepost 1, but they may start at the age of 6 instead of the age of 5. You can see some pictures there, which has some samples of our units that we have available. The units last between 3 and 12 weeks, and most of them involve 3 or more subjects, which include specific international lessons. We do have an exception to this, which is our science units, which I'll talk about later. Learning in all our units follows a specific process in a similar way to the IEYC. So we have a hook at the beginning in the same way that they capture curiosity and develop through things, but our system has been designed to be more age appropriate for the 5 to the 11-year-olds. So after the entry point, the hook activity, which hopefully motivates them for learning, then they will move on and we'll do a knowledge harvest so we know where we're starting with the children before we actually go into the main body of the unit. We always provide a big picture for teachers, which is that background information. And we also then have what we call research and record activities. The research is where they will be finding out more, looking for knowledge, developing understanding, practicing skills. And then we will also have the recording. Recording is thinking about how children process their learning, how they share it with others, how they take records of it, how they might present it, those kinds of things. And After all of this learning, they will work towards what's called an exit point. This is their celebration of learning. Many schools invite parents to these so that they can get involved, and they might get taught by the learners, or they might get an insight into the relevance of the things that they've been learning over the previous few weeks. We do have a route plan, which I'm going to explain to you, which relates to the English National Curriculum and the coverage. But if you have flexibility of curriculum coverage, then you can use our 131 units to build your own route plan. And we have an online system where you can just drag and drop and arrange them over the 2 years of the milepost. And this will help you then check for balance of coverage across all subjects. And it will help you see whether you've covered all the learning goals or not. So this is our route plan for those schools that wish to cover the whole of the English National Curriculum. So this is a recommended route plan that was revised with the NC 14 objectives. So it covers the science and the foundation subjects. And if you want to be confident that you're covering everything, this is the route plan that we would recommend. We do have some schools who make some tweaks to this and some adjustments because they've decided that, for example, some of our science in Key Stage 1 actually goes above and beyond what's expected. So they've decided to swap that out and replace it with something else. We do have cross-reference documents, which I will show you in a moment, and that shows you exactly which objectives are covered so that you can see how it relates to the national curriculum. So this is just an example from our milepost 3 from our older learners. And you can see, so we have our units written across the top, and then on the right-hand side, the NC 14 objectives. And each of the units that is included in the route plan, you can see those blocks show you where it is covered. So if you want to cover your geography, then you need to do the unit Earth as an Island, because that's where the main coverage is. Some of our units were designed with the national curriculum in mind. However, we have a much broader range than that with our 131 units. So the IPC does not provide units that covers all aspects of English and maths. We find that most schools follow a required or selected and brought in paid for programme of study. However, we do have English and maths goals within the IPC. And so in the thematic units, we provide opportunities to use or extend maths and language skills and knowledge as they're working through the units. So here's an example of 3 of our science-specific units. These are focused on the changing materials strand. This enables children to progress through the strand, revisiting and extending their knowledge, practicing their skills, and developing understanding. These units could be done at any time within the milepost, so freeze it in year 1 or 2, shake it in year 3 or 4, bake it in year 5 or 6. Some schools choose to do it at the same time, and when they have their exit point, they'll have a whole school exit point around changing materials and maybe set up a science fair showing the different things that they've been doing. So the national curriculum programs of study are set out by year. However, the expectation is that they are covered across the key stage, which is why you can have that flexibility of approaching these units in either of the years of the milepost. We have similar sets of these for forces, animals and habitats, and plants and growing and changing as well. So to support with science understanding, whether you have everything covered, we have specific science cross-reference documents. These refer to the units that are included in the recommended plan. If you decide to use your own route plan and include other ones of our units, you would have to do a cross-reference for yourself, but you can see how the format works, so it'd be very easy to take on. So this shows you the different strands in our milepost 1 science and how they relate to the NC 14 objectives. Now, special to the IPC are 3 units which we call the Brainwave units. The recommendation is that these are done first at the beginning of the milepost. The idea is that they're focused on learning to learn, and they'll help children understand how learning happens and the effort that's actually involved in learning. It also introduces them to the basics of brain function and how that connects to the learning. These follow exactly the same learning process as our other thematic units. So they will begin with the hook, our entry point, and they will go through the research and recording, and then they will have an exit point as well. Some schools choose to split this unit, and they'll do some at the beginning of year 1, some at the beginning of year 2, and so on. Now, our final part is to do with international learning. So unique to the IPC are the international learning goals, and these drive learning about what we call the host, home or heritage, and adopted countries. These will be different depending on the school context. For international schools, the host and home country provides the learner with connections to where they currently live and where they consider home. For some schools, the home and host country is the same for the majority of learners. In these schools, the school may choose, or the class may choose, to adopt a relevant country for a specific unit. For example, if they're looking at rainforests, they may adopt Brazil for that unit. Some schools also choose to have a country of interest for the entire year, and this can actually connect to how they're supporting through charitable contributions, pen pal connections, and other things like that. The main aim is to broaden the exposure to multiple perspectives and to develop empathy and respect through considering commonalities and differences of experience. So I'm going to hand over to Therese. I don't think there's any questions on the IPC at the moment, and she will then explain about the IMYC.
Thank you, Jackie, and hi everyone. I'm back again. This is Therese. So if we move over to the IMYC, and this is for students aged 11 to 14, and there are many similarities between what you've just heard from Jackie and about the IPC and the IMYC. Obviously, the main difference is that the IMYC has been written for a secondary school environment where the child moves between classes. So it requires the teachers to adapt to help the learning journey of each child. So in the IMYC, we do have 30 units, which is 10 per year group. And you can see here there's the names of some of the units, which we call the theme. So, for example, for the theme of adaptability, that might be what the teachers refer to the unit as, but the most important thing about the theme is actually what the big idea is. So each theme has a big idea attached to it, and you can see that the one for adaptability is demonstrated by the ability to change, alter, or cope with new environments or circumstances. And each subject teacher will be required to make connections to that big idea through the learning activities that they plan for their class. So the idea is that the children can make connections to this overarching concept, which all of their subjects feed into. They do still have an entry point and an exit point, as Jackie explained in the learning process, and I'll come on to that on the next slide. But important for teachers to know is that on our member website on My Fieldwork, there is a route planning tool where schools can drag and drop units to show the coverage of learning goals for lots of different routes. And the learning goals for the IMYC have been mapped with the English National Curriculum for 2013. So it's possible to check coverage using the document, and I'll come on to that in a minute as well. So this is the learning process for the IMYC, and you can see that the big idea is in the centre because that's what all teachers should be connecting to in their subjects. So they're delivered through this consistent format, and this process has been developed in relation to neuroeducational research on the teenage brain and the ways in which teenagers learn. And some parts of the process are delivered in whole year groups. So we would encourage schools to run their entry points and exit points with the entire cohort of students, whereas some parts are delivered at a class level. So knowledge harvest, learning activities, reflective journaling can all be delivered from a class perspective. This is the mapping document for for the IMYC and the English National Curriculum, and it was written in 2014 to account for the changes that were introduced in 2013, and it's available to all of our members through our member website, My Fieldwork. So the table here shows the subjects that are included in the English National Curriculum, which is the column on the left, compared with the IMYC subjects, which is the column on the right. And there's a section for each of these subjects in the document outlining where there is alignment and specific areas where schools may have to adapt the curriculum to meet the specific content of the English National Curriculum. So if I just show you an example, so this is an example from Design Technology in the English National Curriculum and the Technology Learning Goals of the IMYC. So all of the subjects outlined on the previous slide have a table like this one where the English National Curriculum content is mapped against the IMYC content. And you can see here that there is quite a lot of alignment between the two curricula. If I show you this slide, so you can see here that there's some content that's not covered by the IMYC learning goals, and this is identified in the document. So this is an example from citizenship, where there's some content in the English National Curriculum that's not covered specifically by the IMYC. However, what we suggest to schools is that since the big ideas are so overarching understandings, it's possible for the school to develop their own ways of fitting in these English National Curriculum learning goals into the big ideas, and it shouldn't be too difficult to find a suitable place for them to fit into. We don't believe that it's a very time-consuming process, and we're happy to work with schools on that where they have to cover content. And I can see there's a question from Olivia. So Olivia, we haven't mapped our curriculum against the IB, no. I'm sorry, we haven't done that. And Jackie's saying that the IB scope and sequence are optional, so we haven't mapped against those. But I'm glad to hear your feedback on the IPC and that the school enjoyed the impact. So thank you very much. So that brings us really to the end of the content that we were aiming to cover today. So I think we're open now to taking questions if anyone has any about any of the three curricula or anything that we've discussed this morning. So please feel free to type in your questions.
As Therese mentioned, we would now like to take some time to answer any questions that you've sent to us during the webinar. We'll go through them and direct them towards specific curriculum leads as requested. We've got quite a few for the IEYC, IPC and the IMYC, which I will attempt to go through now. We've got a couple of questions for the IEYC, which I will be able to answer for you. So we have one that says, do we have to use the EYFS to use the IEYC? So the EYFS is, as you all know, not actually a curriculum, but a framework, and that's what enables the IEYC to fit inside the EYFS implementation. So no, you do not need to be using the EYFS in order to implement the IEYC, as the IEYC is a whole curriculum, which also has its own assessments embedded within the units of learning. Another question that we received was, do I have to be using the EYFS to use Tapestry? Can it work with our own national curriculum? Absolutely. Tapestry has a variety of curriculums available to you on their platform. I believe they have the Australian early years framework. They have the Irish curriculum. They have several others. I believe they've got an additional needs curriculum on there. So essentially, if you are willing to or would like to trial Tapestry, there are several other curriculums available on there, in addition to the EYFS and Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. Another question that was for the IEYC was, will there be more support for IEYC assessment? Yes, so we are working on an assessment for learning document for the IEYC, which will provide guidance and support in how you can assess for the IEYC via quality observations over quantity, and how these assessments can be recorded to provide you with meaningful feedback and data into how the learning is taking place in your school or class. You know, whilst assessment is important to track progress and check the coverage of learning strands in the IEYC, It's also important to remember that for early years, it's more about being present in the moment to capture curiosity and catch those special moments that are happening in your classroom without focusing too much on paperwork and writing every little detail down. I know teachers can feel the pressure of providing reports for parents and showing the progress of their children, but it's important to establish that the curriculum has been created to provide a holistic and non-linear journey, but yes, there will be more guidance on assessment for learning for the IEYC. Let me just have a look. We've got a couple of questions for Jackie as well. Sorry, I'm just keeping up with the chat, so bear with me. We've got, how do we specifically, sorry, if I start milepost 1 at 6 years and end elementary at 11 years, should we be doing 1 year of milepost 1 or 1 year of milepost 3? Jackie, if you could unmute yourself.
I've lost sound from you, unfortunately, Sneha. I heard the beginning of the question. So it's to do with the number of years in the milepost, is that correct?
Sorry, I think, okay, we'll move on to a question for Therese. Therese, we've got a couple of questions regarding the IMYC. Do learners move to English qualifications after the IMYC, and how does it help to prepare them for this?
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Okay, I hope that you can all hear me. But in terms of what learners move on to after the IMYC, it's up to the school. Thank you, Nadine. So it's absolutely up to the schools. So some of our schools move on to IGCSE qualifications. Some of our schools move on to qualifications that are set by the school for a couple of years and then move on to the IB diploma or A levels. So it's really, really up to the school. And what we say in the IMYC is that our learning goals are sufficient to enable that transition into that first year of what we would refer to as high school. So from leaving middle school to high school, our learning goals are sufficient and appropriate for learners to make that transition. So we don't make any recommendations for what schools should do after the IMYC, but what we plan for and what we hear in terms of from our schools is that learners are able to make the transition into whatever age appropriate programme schools decide on next.
Apologies, everyone. I had a little trouble with my sound, so I just switched to a different audio. So hopefully you can hear me a little better now. Thank you, Therese, and apologies, Jackie, for not being able to hear you. We've got a couple more questions regarding the IMYC and IPC. Apologies, everyone. I will go through the chat and get through them. It says, I've read about the curriculum review. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we'll be doing?
I'm happy to take that question. This is Therese, but if Jess wants to jump in at any point or Sneha, then please feel free. We are really excited to be preparing the curriculum review for you. We've undertaken quite an extensive review of our units in the IPC Milepost 1 and the IMYC units. We've written new learning goals and we have aligned units and developed new units to make sure that what is in the IPC and IMYC is really, really relevant and up to date. All of the links are definitely working. We've got some new personal goals, which we're really excited about. All of this you can read about if you go to my fieldwork and resources and documents. There is actually a tab on the left-hand side for you to read all about the curriculum update. And also, if you look under the communication section, then you'll be able to see all of our recent letters, which we've sent out communicating about the different elements of the update. So we're really excited to be sharing that with you soon. And Jackie, feel free to add anything on.
I think that's a good summary. Hopefully it will be exciting. And I think one of the interesting things is looking at questions to do with sort of English as a second language and English teaching as a foreign language. That's one of the things that we have thought about quite carefully with the review as well.
you, Jackie and Therese. Just going through the chat now as well. You mentioned that other curriculums are used. Oh, sorry, that one has been addressed. Hello, is there a suggested route plan for the IEYC? There is no route plan suggestion for the IEYC. As mentioned, it's not a set curriculum as such. All the units cover most of the learning goals that are available that for assessment. Therefore, there's no set route plan for the IEYC. However, there is a document that we created earlier this year that shows coverage of learning strands. That's available on My Fieldwork. So if you go to support documents, there's a document available there that will show you which units cover which learning strands, so you can have an idea of your plan for the year. But generally, the units are being selected according to the children's interests and curiosity within your classroom. Usually the unit that schools start off with in September or at the beginning of the academic year is This Is Me. And then essentially you continue on from there according to the interests of the children, according to their developmental abilities, but there's no set route plan available as such. Another question for the IPC curriculum. I'm also interested to know how IPC can be combined with the Cambridge curriculum for teaching EFL.
Okay, well, one of the things is the IPC is not a curriculum to teach language. So while we do have goals for English or for modern foreign languages at the moment, and we do have a couple of units for modern foreign languages, these are kinds of ways of kind of applying and extending language. So what we would say is you have your language program, whether you're teaching English as a foreign language or whether you're teaching English as the medium of instruction language, as well as an additional language, because we would encourage that because it supports the international mindedness aspect. You don't actually use a thematic unit to teach the language. Within the thematic units, you should be taking opportunities to make connections so they can transfer and apply the skills of language that they've been learning. Equally, they can also think about how you do vocabulary extension. So you look at the vocabulary that's going to be needed to talk about learning within the unit, and that's kind of one of the areas that should go across, whether it's English as a foreign language, English as a second language, English as additional language, or any other language as an additional language. Those connections should be made that way.
Thank you, Jackie. And I think another one for the IPC, do we need to align all special subjects we have, like music, PE, arts, to the current theme, even if the subjects are not present to the specific unit?
No, so what we've done is we've brought the subjects together that we think best further the learning around that theme. So it may be that you have some teachers that can kind of go, oh, right, so you're going to be looking at buildings, I'm going to do architecture and things like this. As long as it is driven by learning goals, so it is furthering the learning goals of the subject, that is fine. But we would say, don't just make the connections for the sake of it. It's got to be about being learner driven. So if it's something that enhances the learning for each of the learners, if building those connections you think makes the learning stronger on thematic units, fine, but it's not necessary to do that because each teacher needs to be able to meet the goals of their own program, and you can't necessarily do that through a particular thematic unit. Now, one of the things that we've been looking at for the review is really strengthening specialist teachers, single subject teachers, using the same process of learning that the teachers would use for the thematic unit, because we think that that's based on research about how best to learn. So a teacher who is a single subject teacher of PE or music or art or ICT can decide, okay, no, my learning doesn't connect this time, it's not part of the thematic unit, so I'll be doing my own thing. But we would still encourage them to have an entry point, a knowledge harvest, so they know where the learners are now, and to look at that idea of research and record.
Thank you, Jackie. I can see a question from Michaela. Is this the same for the IEYC? I try to link the Hamilton Trust planning to the IEYC unit, but it doesn't always link in. No, absolutely, Michaela. There's no pressure to absolutely have to link all subjects to each unit, obviously, because it depends upon the context of your school, which country it's in, and what the other subjects are actually planning for the IEYC as well. Obviously, if cross-curricular links can be made, that's wonderful. And if you can liaise and collaborate with the subject teachers as to what they're doing with the early years children in your class, it's always wonderful to try and link it in. as much as possible, but there's no requirement that you absolutely have to have everything in, because obviously the way in which the specialist subjects lessons and classes are carried out in different schools is different. So essentially, if you can collaborate, that's wonderful. If it's not possible, then you absolutely don't have to force the links in to try and make it all work and fit together. There's a question as well about a webinar for schools where use English as second language, how to link and to integrate IPC and our own national curriculum. So we actually have an open mic webinar which we'd like to plan. So if you have suggestions for what you'd like to hear for these webinars, please do let us know. You'll see our contact details available at the end of the webinar. I can see a few more questions. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through.
I'm happy to take the one about MFL.
Yes, thank you, Therese.
No problem. Thank you for the question about MFL. So languages or second languages and or additional languages and mathematics are often questions that come up in the IMYC because we don't write units for those subjects at the moment. What we recommend schools do is plan what they would like to teach using the learning goals that are there, and try and fit in with the big ideas on the school's route plan as best as possible. So if the big idea, the theme is balance, and we would just encourage the teachers of mathematics and the additional languages to try and make connections with the big idea as best as possible. And it might not always be very easy. We ask that you don't do it in a way that just is for the sake of it. The connection ideally should be a meaningful one. But even just having the big idea up on the wall in the classroom helps the students to know that that subject is still connected. And if they are able to make connections with the big ideas, then that's only going to reinforce the overarching understanding that the students develop. So even if it's just the lesson plenary, maybe in English rather than, or in the language of instruction rather than the target language, to say, how could this learning connect with the big idea? Even things like that would be a real help to help the children make those connections. If the teacher hasn't found any, because maybe the students will be able to see them. So it's not very helpful to you, but hopefully it's a little bit more guidance in terms of the most important thing is to make the connection to the big idea where possible.
Thank you, Therese. I'm just going to go back to the question that you couldn't hear me saying due to my audio issues. I apologise. This is for the IPC, which was the number of years for the milepost, I believe. I'm just going to go back to that question. If I start milepost 1 at 6 years and end elementary at 11 years, should we be doing 1 year of milepost 1 or 1 year of milepost 3?
I think that's a really difficult question to ask generally. I'm sure that sort of people like Sarah who are on the call will have more experiences with different schools. My gut reaction would be it depends on the level of expectations that you have from local requirements. So you kind of need to have a look at the alignment of the goals to see whether it's better to do the 2 years of milepost 3. For example, we do know that in the Netherlands that they actually take milepost 3 to 12 years old because that is what suits their local requirements. They've kind of designed their own particular version almost of the IPC that's called the Netherlands IPC, where they've looked at how that works for them. I don't know, Sarah, if you're on the call, if you've got experience of countries that only have 5 years of sort of elementary schooling and how they've chosen to do it.
Hi, thanks, Jackie. Yeah, there are quite a number of schools actually in that situation in different regions in the world. And I think what you're saying is absolutely right. It depends on the context. It also depends on the type of learners. So I think many schools where learners have English as a second language, getting in the 2 years of milepost 1 really helps build in those foundations, and then looking at the transition points, so looking at how they transition maybe from kindergarten through to elementary, where you might start an IPC unit in the last semester of kindergarten, and as you mentioned, the transition from primary into middle years if they're an all-through school.
Thank you, Sarah and Jackie. We've got another question for the IEYC from Anjana. The maths topics are very basic. In our school, we do much more. So what do you suggest to teach certain subjects separately, as it does not meet the requirements? Yes, I agree. It would be great for IEYC to come up with their own literacy and maths program to use with the IEYC. So we do get this question quite a lot, actually, regarding the curriculum. And the reason that we haven't created, we've discussed this quite a lot over the years, and the reason we haven't created our own specific literacy and mathematics program is due to the fact that we feel the curriculum is used internationally all over the world, and the language programs therefore also vary quite a lot all over the world in terms of phonics, in terms of language, and obviously schools that are bilingual that are teaching their home country language as well. So we haven't actually come up with a specific literacy and math program because we felt it would be a little bit difficult to try and adapt this and create it so that it would be relevant to schools all over the world. Because as I said, phonics are taught in very different ways, mathematics are taught in very different ways. Therefore, we haven't come up with a specific literacy and mathematics unit for the IEYC. However, within the units, as you've quite rightly mentioned, there are links, there are language and mathematics links that you can make for the units. However, we haven't come up with a specific English and maths program for the IEYC for this reason. Just having a quick look, why are there only 3 brainwave units for 6 years of the IPC and no brainwave units for the IMYC? Therese, that might be one for you.
Sorry, can you just repeat that question, Sneha?
Sorry. So why are there only 3 brainwave units for the 6 years of IPC and no brainwave units for the IMYC?
Well, I think that we would just ask you to stay tuned. And we have developed some for the new IMYC. So that's part of the IMYC 2020, which will be releasing soon. So one of the new subjects that we've added to IMYC is health and wellbeing. And as part of the health and wellbeing learning goals, we have, added coverage of the metacognition and like strategies for learning and the teenage brain. So we have developed 3 brainwave units for the new IMYC, which are not connected to a big idea. They are designed to be delivered on the first day or 2 days of a new school year, or they could also be delivered over a 6-week period at the beginning of the year, but they're not connected to a big idea just because we didn't want that to dictate a school's route plan. And I don't know if Jackie, you want to jump in here, but we have also added some new brainwave units for the IPC as well, so that there will be 2 in milepost 1 when we release the new curriculum. I don't know if you want to say more about that, Jackie.
I think that's fine. We've heard from schools that they are using the brainwaves differently. So even though they use them at the beginning of milepost 1, halfway through milepost 1, they'll then actually kind of review the learning just to check that the sort of strategies around learning, the understanding of the brain continues, so that children don't forget it, because it is quite a specific learning area, as opposed to the other subjects where some of the goals come up repeatedly. It probably comes up less with regards to the brainwave, but in the review, because it's part of health and well-being, we do hope that this will remind teachers to kind of keep going back and making sure they're actually applying the learning that comes from the brainwave units.
Thank you, Jackie and Therese. We've got another question for the IMYC, Jackie, if you could stay on. Is there an IMYC diploma issued by Fieldwork for students who graduated from year
9? Thanks, Neha. I'll take it. It's Therese.
Therese, sorry.
Sorry. At the moment, no, we do not have an IMYC diploma. And one of the issues with us creating a diploma would be that our current stance on assessment is that we assess skills using our assessment for learning programme, and that includes the use of the rubrics, but we do not dictate how knowledge is assessed. And as we've heard already on this call, many schools are using our learning goals in addition to learning goals from their own local context. And that means that the knowledge that students have to learn is different in many places. So we have not ever introduced an assessment for that reason, which would mean we don't have any quality assurance mechanism for awarding a diploma at the end of the IMYC at age 14. So that is currently not in our plans to do. But I think we're open to having conversations about it, but it's not currently in any of our plans.
Thank you, Therese. We've got a couple more regarding the IEYC that I'm just having a quick look at. What would you say is the best programme to use for those following UK national curriculum in the IEYC? So I would say that we'd like to be very careful before we recommend a specific programme, because it may work for some and not work for others. But Michaela, I'd be really happy to have this conversation with you. So if you would like to just send me an email, my contact details will be available at the end of the webinar, and I'm more than happy to discuss this with you, and we can talk about which programs schools have been using and which are working for them. But in terms of one that we would recommend, we're a bit careful about that, because obviously it could work for some, and it would be difficult for us to actually endorse a specific program. Also, we've got another one from Anita. It'd be really great if IEYC comes up with their own literacy and mathematics curriculum. I hear you, but as I said, regarding the literacy, it's a little tricky due to the different expectations of language all over the world. The same with mathematics, I would say, to a certain extent. But again, Anita, I'm more than happy to discuss this with you. If you'd like to contact me, and we can discuss what programs you're currently using and how that's working for you, how it might not be working for you. It's really good feedback for us, actually, to understand what the different requirements are all over the world. But at the moment, in terms of actually coming up with a specific literacy and mathematics program, it's something that we can continue to discuss. So I'm happy to definitely speak to you about it as well if you'd like to contact me. I think that's everyone's questions. Jackie and Therese, would you like to add anything further to the webinar today? Thank you for joining us.
I think this is Therese. Hi everyone. Just to say a big thank you to everyone for coming, and a big thank you to your team today for organising and for bringing the community together at what is a really challenging time for everyone. And we just encourage people to stay engaged with us and write on the pin board, and please do contact us with any further questions that might emerge. So just thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be challenging because schools are in very, very different contexts and locations, but you can always email members@fieldworkeducation.com, and we will then do our best to answer questions that are specific to you and help you out. We have a team with experiences all over the world, so hopefully we can connect you to the right person.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jackie and Therese, for joining us today, and thank you to all our attendees as well for having such lovely questions, actually, because it really opens up a positive dialogue amongst schools all over the world, and it gives us really valuable feedback as to how it's being implemented in schools, especially given the situation at the moment where schools have had to go into lockdown and deliver these lessons remotely. So I think there's a lot of challenges that people are facing at the moment, and indeed we're all trying to ensure that we can help each other and start a really good dialogue amongst schools so that we can share our experiences and share that we're all going through this together, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of reassurance that everybody is essentially in the same position, if not different levels of restrictions all over the world. So as you can see on the screen, these are my contact details. If you have any specific IEYC related questions or even questions regarding the webinars, please do get in touch. You can also contact our curriculum team, as Therese and Jackie mentioned, if you have any further questions regarding the IPC or the IMYC. We'd be happy to get back to you on that, always looking for feedback. So we've come to the end of the webinar today regarding the IEYC, IPC and IMYC and the English curriculum. Thank you for joining us for this session. We hope, as mentioned, it's been a good opportunity to gain some insight into how schools all over the world have been delivering our international curriculum alongside the English national curriculum. If you'd like to get in touch about this webinar or sign up for any future webinars, you can go to the Eventbrite page. We're adding new webinars each week, and please also keep an eye on your emails for the latest newsletters with more information regarding the webinars that are taking place and how to register for them. We'll also share a recording of this webinar very soon. I apologise for the sound issues I was having a little earlier as well. You can also connect with us online via various social media platforms. Thank you very much once again to everybody for joining us.